Bibi Dong frowned but said nothing. "What is it?" "Master, I'd like to leave for the Heavenly Dew Empire tomorrow," Shi Feng said without hesitation. Bibi Dong lifted an eyebrow. "You only just returned from the capital of slaughter. Don't you want to rest for a few days?" Shi Feng shook his head. "I can't afford any delay. The sooner I arrive, the sooner I can help Sister Xiaoxue." Bibi Dong brushed a strand of hair from her smooth, jade-like cheek, her expression thoughtful. "When you reach the Heavenly Dew Empire, do you plan to stay here in the Spirit Hall or go straight to her side?" Shi Feng met her gaze calmly. "Is there a difference?" Bibi Dong looked up from her scroll and explained. "Once you're inside the temple, your task is to keep in touch with her covertly, relay messages, clear obstacles, and keep her informed. Bibi Saras will train you in the necessary techniques when you arrive." She paused, then added, "If you choose to stay by her side, we'll craft an appropriate identity for you." Shi Feng had two objectives on this journey to the Heavenly Dew Empire, to reunite with Xiaoxue and to expand his influence there, so he made his decision without hesitation. "I'll remain with Xiaoxue," he said firmly. Bibi Dong nodded as though she'd expected nothing less. "Once you reach Heavenly Dew City, seek out Solace. He'll arrange a meeting for you with Xiaoxue." Hearing his teacher refer to Xiaoxue so naturally pleased Shi Feng, and he allowed himself a small smile. "Thank you, teacher." "Off you go tomorrow," Bibi Dong said, her gaze drifting back to her documents. "There's no need for you to return to me." Shi Feng hesitated at the doorway. "Teacher, is there nothing you'd like me to give to Sister Xiaoxue? Any final instructions?" Bibi Dong's head remained bowed. "No," she murmured, her voice distant, "and succeed." With that, Shi Feng bowed once more and slipped out into the night, his mind already racing ahead to the trials that awaited him and to the reunion he longed for. Chapter 178. Bibi Dong's hand froze mid-scroll through the documents. Her cheeks lifted, and her gaze locked onto Shi Feng. He met her eyes steadily. 10 seconds passed before she finally exhaled a long sigh, then flicked her jade-like hand to close the study doors with a soft click. Under Shi Feng's guidance these past months, Bibi Dong had shed much of her former reserve. She reached into her soul guide, a spirit talisman storage device, and produced a neat stack of jade vials, each containing a different alchemical pill. "Since you began instructing us," she said, "our alchemists have improved by leaps and bounds. We've also trained a wave of new practitioners. Now our elixirs are sought after by both the army and the Spirit Hall's elite." She handed the vials to Shi Feng. "Take these, and give her plenty." Shi Feng inclined his head and stored the vials in his own soul guide. As Bibi Dong turned to leave, he added, "Teacher, is there anything else? Xiaoxue will be thrilled to receive your gift." Bibi Dong's shoulders trembled, and she paused, looking at him with conflicted eyes. Over the years under his tutelage, she had grown not just in alchemical skill but in spirit, and she longed now to lay aside her defenses. Bibi Dong squeezed her eyes shut, long lashes trembling as tiny pearls of tears slipped down her cheeks. She began, her voice breaking. Shi Feng felt a pang of helplessness. Every time he offered comfort, Bibi Dong grew emotional. With Hu Lina or Qianren he wouldn't hesitate to pull them into a reassuring hug, but this was his teacher. He stiffened, unsure of how to help her. "Miss Bibi, you're all right," he stammered, forcing a smile. At his words, Bibi Dong blinked, composing herself. She reached into her soul tool and produced several bundles of clothing, neatly unfolding them on the table. Elegant skirts, sweeping gowns, and finely tailored jackets, all in a spectrum of colors. "These are custom-made for Xiaoxue," she said softly. "Will you please deliver them? I'm not certain about the four." Her decisive tone returned in an instant. No hesitation, no doubt. Shi Feng's smile grew warmer. "I'm sure they'll fit perfectly. Xiaoxue is going to love them." He gathered up the garments quickly, heartened by this gesture. It was a promising first step. Bibi Dong genuinely wanted to bridge the gap between herself and Qianren. "Teacher, is there anything else I can bring?" Shi Feng asked as he gathered up the clothes. Bibi Dong visibly relaxed and offered him a warm smile. "Just let her know that once we're done, we'll all have dinner together." Shi Feng felt a surge of satisfaction now that his efforts had finally paid off. He could already imagine Qianren throwing her arms around him in delight, maybe even planting a few kisses on his cheek. A small smile played on his lips as he indulged in the mental image. Bibi Dong met his gaze with a serene intensity. Her voice was soft, almost tender. "Little Feng, thank you." He bowed respectfully. "Teacher, we're a family now. You're my senior. You deserve my utmost loyalty." Bibi Dong nodded once. "That will be all for today. You may make your own way back tomorrow." With a quick farewell, Shi Feng left her study. He noted that Zhao Yuyue and Jing Wuming had gone in the direction of Wuhundian Academy and were likely already there. He'd considered tracking them down before his departure, but in the end, he dismissed the idea. There was nothing urgent to discuss, and he couldn't spare the time. Tonight's schedule was too important. He had to trust Hulina to handle anything that arose in his absence. Back in the dormitory, he wasted no time. Shi Feng slipped into the bathroom, turned the water to its hottest setting, and scrubbed away the grime and tension of the day. Fresh and alert, he prepared himself mentally for the critical night ahead. Shi Feng let out a quiet sigh. Tonight had changed him. He felt it deep in his bones. Like a bud that's finally bloomed, Juliana stood before him, all soft petals and promise. He'd known this moment was coming ever since they'd left the killing capital together, but fate had kept pushing them apart. Now, nothing stood in their way. Half an hour later, Shi Feng emerged from the bathroom, wearing nothing but a pair of loose trousers. His hair was damp, and the last traces of wine still lingered on his breath, lending him an easy, carefree swagger. Without even pausing by the door, he crossed the threshold by climbing through the open window, landing soundlessly on the balcony. Inside her room, Hulina sat cross-legged on the edge of the bed, her silk pajamas whispering against the sheets as she practiced her breathing exercises. At the soft scrape of his footsteps, her eyes fluttered open. Shi Feng stood framed by the moonlight, every line of his body cast in sharp relief. Broad shoulders, a tight, sinewy waist, and firm abdominal muscles that hinted at the strength coiled beneath his skin. Even in repose, he seemed poised for motion, every inch of him alive with restrained energy. Hulina's heart fluttered as she took in the sight. No longer the boy she'd first met, shy, uncertain, and untested. This man had grown confident and powerful. He stepped forward, the faint echo of silk on stone following him like a promise. Their eyes met, and the world narrowed to that single, electric moment. All the waiting, all the longing, crystallized into the gentle brush of skin on skin as Shi Feng reached out, gathering Hulina into his arms. The future stretched before them, wide open and full of possibility, and at last they walked into it together. Juliana noticed Shi Feng's reaction the instant he let go of her hand. The roots of her ears were flaming red, and her heart felt ready to burst out of her chest. "Shi Feng," she murmured, utterly flustered, though she wasn't quite sure what to say. Shi Feng didn't answer. He'd always been a man of action, believing that deeds spoke louder than words. He simply stepped back, staring at the intense flush on her face with a puzzled frown. "What's this?" he asked, genuinely confused. Juliana's cheeks burned hotter still. She dared not meet his eyes. "It's my blush," she whispered so softly he almost missed it. Shi Feng slapped his forehead and muttered an expletive under his breath. "Damn it! How could I forget?" He'd spent half a month caring for Juliana back in the death capital, and remembered now why today was so important. It was the anniversary of her very first confession. He'd been so determined to help make her dream come true, and yet he'd completely overlooked this crucial date. The blaze died out in an instant, leaving Shi Feng's face smeared with soot. He felt as if the weight of the world pressed against his chest. "Shi Feng, your face," Juliana whispered, unable to look directly at him. A thin trickle of blood ran down his forehead. Instinctively, he swiped at it, only to find his palms stained bright red. He stared at the crimson smear, heart pounding, and thought, "I'm Shi Feng." Shakily, he stood and washed off the soot and blood. When he returned, Juliana had smoothed her skirts and was sitting patiently on the couch. Under the soft glow of the lamp, her skin had a gentle, rosy sheen that made her look almost ethereal. Shi Feng hesitated for a moment, uncertain, then climbed onto the couch and wrapped his arms around her. "Lena, you only arrived today, right?" he asked, his voice hoarse. She nodded, pressing her cheek against his chest. Her dark eyes curved into crescent moons as she offered him a comforting smile. His throat tightened. Tomorrow morning, he would have to leave, and then another 6 days would stretch before him like an endless road. He buried his face in her hair, willing the tears to come, but none did. "I'll be gone at dawn," he whispered. "Don't worry," Lena murmured, stroking his arm. "The next few days will pass faster than you think." Page 243, Senior Sister. "Yes? I'll be leaving for the Heavenly Dew Empire tomorrow. I've just sealed the agreement with Master." Hulina froze for a moment, then slowly exhaled. "If that's what you must do, I'll be here waiting for your return." She understood that Shi Feng's true reason for going was Shuer, and although she had accepted it in her heart, a twinge of unease still lingered. Shi Feng drew her into a tight embrace, resting his face against her hair as he breathed in deeply. "Senior sister, if we're apart too long, how will I know when it's day and night without you?" Juliana pondered his words, her eyes softening and the sadness in her chest melting away. "Feng, just stay with me tonight, like this." "All right." That night, they drifted off in each other's arms. Juliana slept soundly, her breathing even and calm. At first light, Shi Feng didn't slip away unnoticed. Instead, he shared one last breakfast with her. Afterwards, she folded his cloak with gentle care and walked him to the steps of the Pope's palace, where she bid him a heartfelt farewell. Chapter 179, Arrival at Tiando City. "Take care, senior sister." Shi Feng cupped Hulina's face in his hand and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. With a final reassuring smile, he turned on his heel and strode away, his dark cloak swirling behind him. Outside Bibi Dong's courtyard, Shi Feng climbed into his carriage. The road ahead wound through borderlands that stitched together the Heaven Dou Empire and the Star Luo Empire, skirting the edge of the vast Star Dou Great Forest. As the carriage rumbled forward, he stared out at the rolling plains, lost in thought. Since the collapse of centralized rule, the Heaven Dou Empire had splintered into powerful kingdoms and autonomous principalities, each a state within a state. The imperial court at the capital had grown weak and indecisive, unable to rein in its rebellious vassals. If nothing changed, civil war seemed inevitable. Tianda City, once known as Wuhun, sat squarely between these two great empires, a linchpin for whoever could control it. Historically, it had served as both bulwark and battleground, but its strategic value had only grown as nearby powers jostled for supremacy. From the Spirit Hall's perspective, Tiando represented an irresistible opportunity. By seizing the city and rallying its elite Wuhundian forces, they could suppress the major kingdoms of the Heaven Dou Empire, reunify the fractious realm under their own banner, and then press south to conquer the wealthier lands of the Star Luo Empire. Shi Feng mulled over these possibilities. He wasn't privy to Bibi Dong's full strategy. She hadn't shared her plans in detail, yet he could see the outlines of her ambition. If the Spirit Hall succeeded here, the balance of power on the continent would shift irrevocably. The carriage crossed a shallow river, and the spires of Tiando City came into view, bathed in the soft glow of dawn. Towering walls ringed the city like a crown of stone, and banners snapped in the wind from every rampart. Somewhere within lay the next chapter of Shi Feng's journey, one that would test his skill, his courage, and perhaps his loyalties. He took a steadying breath and gripped the carriage rail. Ahead, the gates were about to open. Shi Feng knew that, even in decline, the Star Luo Empire still outmatched the battered Heaven Dou Empire. His mission on this journey was clear: secure control of Heaven Dou for Qianrenshui as quickly as possible. With no escort to slow him down, he abandoned the official highway and struck out cross-country in a straight line. High above him, a small black sparrow scouted ahead, its keen eyes probing for safe passages and hidden dangers. The bird had accompanied Shi Feng for years, not out of its own will, but because he'd fashioned it into a living puppet. He preferred it that way. No independent thought, only reliable reconnaissance. Mounting his swiftest steed, Shi Feng pressed northward without pause. 5 days later, he finally stood on the crest of a hill over Lu, King Tiando City's massive walls. The capital of the Heaven Dou Empire lay before him, its gates both challenge and opportunity. He spurred his horse down the slope, ready to take the first step toward Qianrenshui's ascendancy. Tiando City dwarfed Wuhun City not only in size, but also in wealth and bustle. Its sprawl seemed endless compared to the more compact Wuhun. It was still early afternoon when Shi Feng rode through the gates. His first order of business was to sell his horse, a task he easily accomplished in the city's sprawling livestock quarter. Freed from his mount, he found a nearby tavern, ordered a hearty meal, and settled at a quiet corner table to plan his next move. Back when Bibi Dong had given him her counsel, she'd suggested that he should pay his respects first to the Platinum Bishop Solace in the Holy Hall of the Wuhun Palace here in Tiando, and then proceed on to see Qian Renshui. Solace oversaw all palace affairs for the Wuhun Temple in this city, a logical first stop in theory. But as Shi Feng weighed the risks, he realized the danger of such a direct approach. Although Spirit Hall had yet to launch an all-out war, the Heaven Dew Empire was already wary of the temple's intentions. Rumors whispered that imperial spies were hidden everywhere, even within the palace itself. If word got out about his ties to the Wuhun sect, he'd be watched too closely, perhaps even barred from seeing Qian Renshui at all. After a moment's reflection, he set his fork aside. It would be far safer to slip in unnoticed and meet Qian Renshui first. That way, he could confirm her well-being and make a tentative plan before confronting the watchful eyes at the Holy Hall. With his decision made, Shi Feng drained the last of his tea and rose from the table. Tiando City's labyrinth of alleys lay before him, and he would need all the shadows it offered. Shi Feng settled his bill and stepped out into the night, retracing the winding alleys of Defies. Qian Renshui had shown him. After several twists and turns, he arrived at a modest courtyard, nestled in one of Tiando City's most secluded corners, just the sort of place that escaped the notice of city officials. The high walls and simple wooden gate bore no decoration. It looked lived in, but unremarkable. He raised a fist and knocked firmly on the gate. At first there was only silence. He knocked again, harder, his knuckles echoing against the wood. Still nothing. That was strange. He clearly remembered the young girl who lived here, the one Qian Renshui had introduced him to. Where could she have gone? Footsteps shuffling inside would have been reassuring, but the courtyard remained eerily quiet. Shi Feng frowned, steeling himself for whatever he might find once the door finally opened. Shi Feng paused only for a moment to make sure no one was watching, then vaulted the courtyard wall and slipped inside. Qian Renshui had kept her identity secret, so the grounds remained undisturbed. He landed silently, crossed the front hall, and headed straight for the backyard, where he recalled the hidden passage to her chambers lay concealed in one of the rooms. He unleashed his psychic sight, letting his mental power radiate outward in a sweeping arc. Every plant, every stone, every whisper of life within its reach registered in his mind. Not even a soul master suppressing their aura could slip by him undetected. Footsteps still, he focused on the doorway, shielding the secret stairwell, and caught the faintest pulse of life beyond it. Whoever it was must have been holding their breath to avoid discovery, barely clinging to existence under ordinary scrutiny. Yet to Shi Feng's sharpened senses, even this near-invisible spark flared unmistakably. He stepped forward and tapped on the doorframe. "Is someone in there?" he asked softly. Silence answered him. No rustle behind the wall, no creak of floorboards, only stillness. Shi Feng didn't even pause to introduce himself. He quietly pushed open the door and stepped into the dimly lit chamber. The moment he crossed the threshold, a sliver of sunlight caught the edge of a blade, flashing sharply in his eyes and briefly blinding him. When his vision cleared, he saw a dagger poised before him, its steel surface glinting in the morning light. From the far corner, a lone figure struck. He moved with inhuman speed, his aura completely sealed so that no power betrayed his presence. With barely a breath, the assassin thrust his dagger straight for Shi Feng's heart, lips curled in a cruel, confident smile. He seemed already to savor the moment when Shi Feng would collapse at his feet, but Shi Feng only tilted his head and returned the smile. In an instant, two colossal waves of energy, one icy and crushing, the other fiery and absolute, erupted around him. The assassin's expression froze in horror as a vicious, murderous force bore down on him like 1,000 razor-sharp needles. His limbs stiffened in a sudden, bone-chilling cold. Even the ebb and flow of his soul power stuttered under the assault. He staggered backward, eyes wide with terror, realizing too late that he was utterly outmatched. The ceiling of his aura had concealed nothing but his doom. Shi Feng felt his blood roar as a tide of malevolent resentment surged toward his spiritual sea. The man before him went pale, and the dagger in his hand flickered faster as he lunged at Shi Feng's body. Clang! The blade sheared through fabric but slammed against steel. Armor, the attacker realized. Ding, ding, ding. The dagger delivered a rapid volley of strikes, each one puncturing Shi Feng's defense, yet mysteriously missing any vital point. Under the combined suppression of two great domains, the assailant's strength had been reduced by 20%. Shi Feng, for his part, had reinforced his defenses without even deploying a soul technique. His armor was impenetrable. In the blink of an eye, Shi Feng shot out his hand and seized the attacker's wrist. Under his grip, the skin felt impossibly smooth, like stroking the finest silk. The entire clash had been over in a heartbeat. Had Shi Feng not sensed the other's murderous intent, he might have answered with a thunderous counterstrike. As his vision cleared, he found himself staring at something startlingly familiar. The graceful curve of a woman's cheek, so close he could count the rise and fall of her breathing. Shi Feng's eyes narrowed as he took in the woman before him. Her black hair framed a pair of cold, almost sinister eyes beneath thick, dark brows. Her nose was higher and more defined than most women's, and the sharp angles of her face lent her an almost heroic bearing. Shi Feng realized, with a start, that he'd never learned her name. Last time in Qian Renshui's company, he'd paid no heed to her features. Now, from this close, he could even see the fine hairs along her jaw. The woman's pale lips curled into a scowl. She released the right hand she'd been desperately trying to free, and with a grunt, thrust her knee forward in a vicious strike. The dagger strapped to her thigh, tipped in paralyzing toxin, was meant to incapacitate him for interrogation and torture. She'd presumed he'd be little more than a trapped quarry. To her fury, Shi Feng barely flinched. His stance was unwavering, his eyes locked on her face as if transfixed. A sudden realization flashed across her expression. "He's a man!" she hissed, eyes wide with alarm. Instinctively, she rammed her knee even harder, certain now that she faced a far greater threat than she'd anticipated. Chapter 180, Misunderstanding Thud. The moment her knee crashed home, the girl's face drained of color. It was as if she'd slammed into solid iron, her kneecap threatening to shatter, searing pain lancing up her leg. She stared down at her throbbing joint, disbelief and horror warring in her wide eyes. "How is he still standing?" she gasped. "He's only human, isn't he?" She'd aimed for the most vulnerable spot, the one blow guaranteed to cripple any opponent. Yet Shi Feng had barely moved. Her attack had met something unbreakable. Shi Feng reminded himself that a man must know when to be both pliable and unyielding. This young woman, with her thick brows and wide, alert eyes, didn't seem to recognize him at all. He offered her a friendly smile and said, "Sister, don't you remember me?" He closed his hand around her wrist. His grin was disarming, but she only scowled. He'd seen plenty of bold, headstrong girls in the capital, girls accustomed to rough compliments and brazen advances. He hadn't expected this one to barge in unannounced either. She'd spared him before, not out of kindness, but out of calculation. She assumed he must have allies waiting in the wings, and killing him here would only invite trouble if they showed up. So the moment he stepped into this room, she'd gone straight for the safest play, pin him down and get her questions answered. "Let go." The girl wrenched her arm, but Shi Feng's grip only tightened. His large fingers pressed into her soft skin, making it burn where they dug in. Her expression stayed calm, her voice steady, almost hypnotic. Shi Feng's heart skipped a beat at the surge of power radiating from the girl's outstretched hand. She looked barely past her teens, yet her cultivation was undeniably high, at least soul sect level, if not higher. Something about her demeanor suggested she was closely connected to Qian Renshui, which eased the sting of embarrassment Shi Feng might otherwise have felt at being caught unawares. He glanced to the side, reminding himself that the Holy Child token Bibi Dong had pressed into his soul tool still lay safely hidden, and that producing it now would only terrify the girl further. His gaze drifted back to her face, noting the unusual blend of innocence and steely resolve in her features. Then, unconsciously, it slid lower, to her chest, before he jerked his eyes away. The girl took a wary step back, frost-like chill shimmering around her. She fixed him with a cold stare that felt like blades against his spine. Clearly, she was trying to determine whether he'd discovered the secret hidden within these walls. If he knew nothing, she'd force him out. If he knew too much, she'd capture him alive and await her mistress's instructions. She might be young, but she clearly wouldn't underestimate a foe. Shi Feng sized her up. She had raw strength, but was she a true soul master? He wasn't about to underestimate her either. Stepping forward, he adopted a calm, measured tone. "Who are you?" he asked, voice steady. "And why have you broken into my home?" "You don't believe me? Go ahead, take me to court." The girl snapped, her thick eyebrows nearly bristling with indignation. She stared at Shi Feng, demand in her voice. "You really don't remember me at all?" Shi Feng stepped forward, and she stumbled back 3 paces. With a shrug of helplessness, he explained, "It was about a year ago. My sister brought me here one night. She told you I could come and go whenever I wanted." At his reminder, the girl's large, dark eyes suddenly went wide. She took a long, careful look at him. In truth, Shi Feng hadn't changed much in the past year. Only his features had sharpened, and maturity had settled into his bearing. Where once his face had been round and boyish, now a strong jawline and confident posture made him look like a man in his early 20s. The playful awkwardness of a 13-year-old was gone, replaced by a poised, almost fierce handsomeness. No wonder she hadn't recognized him at first. Silence fell as the girl studied his face, her expression shifting from challenge to dawning realization. Cher froze, her heart pounding as she took in the man before her. Apart from his altered bearing, his features were almost identical to the boy who had come to her that night a year ago. "Shi Feng, is it really you?" she whispered, her gaze flicking to the faint scar on her wrist where she still felt the sting of his bite. Something about his eyes, light, teasing, made her chest tighten. Shi Feng nodded calmly. "Yes, the Pope has sent me to assist you." At his words, Cher's control shattered. "If we're going to talk, at least have the decency to introduce yourself properly." Her voice rang out sharp as a blade. In an instant, her aura flared, dark energy spiraling around her like a tempest. From that vortex coalesced the menacing shape of a giant black serpent. It writhed once, then vanished into her very flesh, leaving only its shadow behind. Her limbs lengthened and strengthened, sinewy muscle rippling beneath her skin, yet her frame remained lithe and flat-chested. 4 spirit rings appeared in midair around her, 2 glowing yellow, 2 deep purple. Even her eyes, once white, had turned ink black. Infused with her martial soul's raw power, Xiaoxue leapt forward, fangs bared and claws outstretched, a wild grin of newfound confidence splitting her face. She assumed that since Shi Feng had come to assist Miss, they were now colleagues, and her pride bristled at the thought. Anger flared in her chest. She would not let him push her around so easily. Working under Miss, she was nobody's pushover. But in less than 2 minutes, Shi Feng had her flat on her back, his grip unyielding. She struggled beneath him as he forced her hands into a reverse wrist lock so tight she couldn't pry them free. Her frantic thrashing did nothing against his terrifying strength. He settled his weight squarely on her lower back, pinning her like a mountain. "Let me go," she choked out, tears stinging her eyes as she fought in vain against his iron hold. Shi Feng's grip didn't loosen. He spoke in a calm, even tone. "Look, there's no need for this drama. I could have brought you down without ever unleashing my martial soul. Just promise me you won't try to make trouble again, and I'll let you up." "Don't make me laugh," the girl hissed, struggling beneath him. Pride flared in her eyes, pride that only yielded to the young miss herself. Now, pinned on the floor, she scowled. "Let me go, or I'll tell the young miss everything." Shi Feng sighed inwardly. Stubborn, that one. She needed a firmer reminder that he wasn't to be trifled with. He straightened his back, clasped her wrists like reins in his left hand, and with his right hand delivered a sharp smack to her backside. The crack echoed through the room, immediately followed by her startled gasp, and then, to his surprise, tears. For a moment, Shi Feng froze. He'd faced countless fierce opponents, and the more defiant they were, the more he relished breaking their will. Yet seeing her cry made him hesitate. Regret flickered through him. He loosened his grip and held out a hand. "All right," he said quietly. "Get up." She sat up, her cheeks streaked with tears, fiercely wiping them away as if she could deny they'd ever fallen. Shi Feng cleared his throat, discomfort prickling at his collar. He had meant to teach her a lesson in humility, but he wondered now if he'd gone too far. Still, there were other matters at hand, and neither of them could afford to linger on this confrontation. Taking a step back, he gave her a curt nod. The lesson had been delivered, for better or worse, and it was time to move on. Shi Feng stared in surprise. He'd never have guessed that this tough-looking girl could actually cry. Guilt pricked at him. If Qian Renshui found out, she'd tear him apart. "Hey, don't cry," he blurted out. "Why don't you give me a couple of slaps, then we'll be even." He turned his back and stuck out his hip. The girl blinked away her tears, fire flaring in her eyes. Before he could brace himself, she swung her leg and kicked him square in the backside. The impact reverberated like she'd kicked iron, and she immediately clutched her foot, wincing. Shi Feng spun back around to see her hopping on one foot, face streaked with more tears. He rubbed his sore cheek and sighed. "I said 2 slaps, he protested, "not a full-on assault." Without a word, she snapped open the hidden trapdoor in the floor and limped toward the darkness beyond. "Wait!" Shi Feng lunged forward, grabbing her arm gently. "If Qian Renshui sees you like this, she'll start asking questions, and bad ones." The girl paused, her tears glistening in the dim light. Shi Feng offered her a steadying hand. Despite the pain, her eyes softened, and she allowed him to guide her away from the passage and towards safety. Chapter 181, Journey to the Palace. Looks like I'll have to take even tougher measures. I still can't believe she isn't afraid to stand before my lady. This young woman carried herself with an arrogant, unyielding air. Among all her peers, few even warranted a glance from her. She dismissed as mediocre anyone who had trained under the Wuhun Temple. The only person she truly respected was my lady herself. She still recalled how immature Shi Feng had been a year ago. He'd seemed so much younger than her. Over the past months, he had defeated her repeatedly, and each time he dominated her with ease. Even someone as strong and proud as she was could be broken by that kind of relentless force. Never before had she been beaten so thoroughly. Her backside still ached from the last blow. Now, under her dark brows, her large eyes, rimmed red from sleepless nights, fixed themselves on Shi Feng. "Are you scared?" she demanded, a triumphant smile tugging at her lips. His guilty, downcast expression told her everything she needed to know. He was indeed afraid of my lady. Shi Feng lifted his chin, forcing a confident tone. "Afraid? Hardly. Your lady is like an elder sister to me, closer than blood. Believe me, there's nothing to fear." She snorted softly, but curiosity glinted in her gaze. "Then perhaps you're ready. We leave for the palace at dawn. Don't disappoint us, Shi Feng." With that, her posture straightened, and she swept past him. Shi Feng watched her go, his heart pounding as the weight of what lay ahead settled over him. The palace awaited, and with it, tests far fiercer than any sparring match. "Complaining won't help," Shi Feng said calmly. "And besides," he added, "you're always the one who makes the first move. I've just been reacting to you." The girl froze, her heart pounding as she replayed every scuffle they'd had. He was right. She had instigated most of their clashes and was now paying the price. Still, after suffering setback after setback at his hands, her anger flared anew. She swallowed the tears she'd been on the verge of shedding. Straightening her shoulders, she turned her face away, her expression hardening into a frozen mask that could have repelled anyone. Shi Feng watched her transformation with genuine surprise. He tucked his identity token back into his pocket. That gesture could wait. Instead, he offered a gentler approach. "So, what's your name? I'd like to know you better." The girl's eyes flicked up at him, then slid away in silence. Although she remained mute, Shi Feng sensed she recognized him. After all, she was clearly close to Qian Renshui. But for now, she wasn't ready to speak. He simply smiled and waited, determined to thaw the ice between them. Shi Feng remained unperturbed. "My name is Shi Feng." The girl's expression didn't change, but in her mind she quietly logged his name, automatically tacking on the epithet she'd already chosen for him, the sex devil. Shi Feng glanced at the girl, who still refused to meet his gaze. Deciding there was nothing more to gain by banter, he found an empty bench and sat down. He planned to rendezvous with Qian Renshui that evening, and he'd promised her he wouldn't send his little bird spying on her again. Just as he settled in, the girl spoke, her voice icy. "This is my room." He looked around in confusion. Nothing about the courtyard suggested it belonged to a family with children, until his eyes fell on a pile of undergarments draped over a chair. Embarrassment flushed his cheeks as he realized she wasn't teasing him. She glared harder, folding her arms. Shi Feng gave a quick, self-deprecating chuckle. "I'll come back tonight," he said, rising from the bench. It wasn't right for a gentleman to linger in a young woman's private quarters. With that, he turned and strolled out of the courtyard gate. Stepping into the crowded streets of Tiando City, he took a deep breath of the evening air. Now was the perfect time to explore the capital of the Heavenly Dou Empire, learn its customs, observe its power players, and discover what secrets lay hidden behind its grand facades. With curious eyes and an eager heart, Shi Feng melted into the throng, ready to unravel the mysteries of this vast city. Shi Feng spent the day wandering past one Soulmaster Academy after another, marveling at the glittering spires of the Seven Treasure Glazed Tile School in Tiando City, and pausing in awe before the majestic halls of the Wuhun Temple. Only when the moon rode high in the night sky did he find his way back to the secluded courtyard. By his third return, the narrow lane leading here felt as familiar as the palm of his hand. Inside the courtyard, the girl was still holed up in her room. Realizing she was a young woman, Shi Feng composed himself and knocked lightly at the door. "Is this a good time? May I come in?" he called. "Just a moment," came her anxious reply, followed by the shuffle of hurried movements. A small smile tugged at Shi Feng's lips. Her voice reminded him of Hu Lina fussing over her clothes. After a few seconds, the door creaked open. There stood the girl, cocooned in a thick blanket from head to toe, resembling a plump rice dumpling. Damp strands of hair peeked from beneath the blanket's folds. Shi Feng couldn't help but roll his eyes. Aside from her flustered state, there was nothing particularly striking about her appearance. Shi Feng's scrutiny put the girl instantly on edge. When she realized he was sizing her up, her almond-shaped eyes blazed with anger, and her eyebrows shot up in indignation. "I'm not interested in you, or in Princess Taiping," she snapped, though she didn't fully grasp why he'd mentioned the royal title. Shi Feng said nothing. He pressed a hidden latch on the stone wall, and a section of rock swung open to reveal a narrow shaft. Before she could protest, he slipped inside. The girl hesitated, frowning at the empty doorway, then jerked her head toward the dark opening. Whatever he was planning, she couldn't let this scoundrel defile her honor. Taking a steadying breath, she followed. The secret passage plunged almost 100 meters straight down. A single iron ladder clung to the rough-hewn walls. Shi Feng had already begun his descent when she climbed in behind him. He froze mid-step, realizing she'd followed him. In the faint glow that filtered down, her wide eyes gleamed like lanterns as she peered at his back. Though she'd wrapped herself tightly in linen, the lower folds fell like a makeshift skirt. Whether from haste or the heat, she'd left herself exposed. Embarrassed, Shi Feng forced himself to look away. He released the ladder rung and dropped silently into the darkness below, determined to keep his thoughts and his gaze strictly to himself. Shi Feng forced himself to look away. Staring any longer risked losing control of his gaze. The spirit before him was called Princess Taiping, complete with every mark of royalty. Yet what truly unsettled him was that her essence wasn't a white tiger, only its. In legend, the white tiger is the fiercest of beasts, nearly impossible for mortals to tame. Just now, when Shi Feng's eyes met hers, the girl had felt a spike of unease. She shifted nervously, rubbing her legs together as if warding off some forgotten dread. But the surrounding darkness swallowed her fear, and her pulse soon slowed. Before her yawned a vertical shaft, nearly 100 meters deep. Unlike Shi Feng, who had simply leapt into the void, she dared not risk such a plunge. Instead, she gripped the iron rungs and descended swiftly. In a matter of moments, she touched down on the cavern floor, where no light pierced the gloom. She extended her spiritual senses, sweeping the shadows for any trace of Shi Feng's aura, but found nothing. Was he already gone? A cold knot of panic formed in her chest. Shi Feng usually bathed at this hour. If that lecherous brute managed to catch him off guard, he didn't hesitate a second. He dropped from the ladder and launched himself forward. Just as the man reached his climax, Shi Feng's 4 spirit rings, 2 glowing yellow, 2 shimmering purple, erupted in brilliant light, casting an ethereal glow over everything around him. Chapter 182. Excited. Xiaoxue. A dull thud echoed through the tunnel as her slender form slammed against something solid. Xiaoxue cried out, pressing her palm to her throbbing forehead as she stumbled backward. Before she could fall, a strong hand shot out and gripped hers, yanking her upright. A pale face loomed close, eyes cold with irritation. "Why are you still here?" he asked. Renxue blinked, disoriented, and rubbed her aching brow. Shi Feng said nothing. He released her hand and continued down the corridor, his tall silhouette melting into the darkness. Gritting her silver teeth against the pane, Renxue followed. Anxiety fluttered in her chest. Why hadn't he summoned his spirit ring to light their way? Could he really see in total blackness? And what had been behind that unreadable stare on the ladder? Her mind raced with questions so fierce her teeth threatened to grind themselves to dust. She stomped once, then, guided by the faint glow of her own soul ring, sprang forward to keep pace. To Shi Feng, night was no different from day. Darkness held no sway over him. Shi Feng halted and ran his fingers along a dark, fist-sized stone set into the tunnel wall. It felt as smooth and cold as polished obsidian. Every 10 meters or so, he found another one. The moment his hand brushed it, he realized why his spirit detection had gone dead. These stones must be suppressing all spiritual power. He couldn't sense anything beyond the corridor, and neither could anyone above ground. "Of course," he muttered, "without these, even a titled Douluo could probe this passage from the outside." Footsteps echoed behind him. The young woman dashed forward, her eyes widening at the sight of Shi Feng touching one of the anti-spirit stones. Can he really see them? She thought, panic tightening her chest. The notion that he might uncover her most guarded secret set her blood boiling. She imagined ripping him apart with her bare hands. But the memory of their fight earlier that day, when he defeated her single-handedly with ease, forced her to swallow her fury. She clenched her fists and stepped back, at least for now. Shi Feng felt a tight knot of guilt in his chest as he watched the girl's hurt expression. Her nose was red, her eyes watery, and her lower lip quivered with unshed tears. If she showed up like this before Renxue, eyes puffy and swollen, how could he possibly explain it? He certainly couldn't admit he'd been staring at someone else's sister. He stepped forward, brows drawn in concern. "What's wrong?" he asked, but the girl only turned her head away, silent. Shi Feng sighed and turned on his heel, beginning to walk down the dimly lit corridor. The girl let out a soft sob and hurried after him. When he broke into a run, she matched his pace, her glowing soul ring casting a pale halo around them in the darkness. "I'm sorry," Shi Feng called over his shoulder, his voice urgent. "I didn't mean to upset you." She stumbled slightly, but kept up. Her tears finally spilled over. "You were staring at her," she whispered, voice shaking. "I wasn't," he protested. "It just looked that way." But she wouldn't look at him. So they ran on in silence, their footsteps echoing together through the empty passage. The small courtyard lay so far from the imperial palace that it took nearly half an hour of brisk walking before Shi Feng reached the base of Renxue's chambers. Instead of a delicate ladder, a steep, narrow stone staircase clung to the outer wall. Just as Shi Feng raised his foot to step up, the girl darted past him. She lifted the hem of her skirt, revealing smooth, pale calves, and scampered upward with remarkable agility. From Shi Feng's angle on the lower steps, it was impossible to glimpse anything beyond the threshold, so she wasn't truly afraid of him peeking inside. What she really dreaded was that, if the young lady had just emerged from her bath, Shi Feng might take advantage of her unguarded state. Sensing her worry, Shi Feng couldn't suppress a smile. He understood her concern, but in truth, the staircase's sharp incline made any such mischief futile. He trailed silently behind, stealing the occasional glance at her retreating figure. From the front, her silhouette appeared ordinary enough, but from behind, she carried herself with a surprising, graceful weight that caught his eye. Step by step, the two of them climbed in silence, each lost in their own thoughts, as the afternoon light slanted across the courtyard below. Even through his heavy cloak, Shi Feng could discern the impressive silhouette before him. She's no weaker than senior sister, he thought. From his vantage in the shadowed tunnel, he watched the courier girl emerge at the end, pause to peer through a small peephole, and, satisfied it was clear, knocked softly before slipping through the concealed door. Inside, moonlight filtered through the window, revealing a tall, elegant young woman, lost in thought. Golden waves of hair cascaded down her back, brushing the hem of her loose silk nightgown, which draped gracefully over her willowy frame. Her eyebrows curved like willow leaves, her eyes were as pure as autumn lakes, and her porcelain skin carried a faint rosebud flush. Yet despite her beauty, a subtle sorrow shadowed her delicate features as she gazed out at the courtyard. At the soft click of the secret door, she turned. "Xiaoying, what are you doing here?" Qian Renshui's voice trembled with concern, and in that moment the gloom that weighed on her heart lifted. "Miss," Xiaoying's reply quivered, each word heavy with unspoken grief. Qian Renshui's brow furrowed as she took in the courier's frost-bitten cloak and thick winter boots. "And why are you dressed like that? Your forehead." Qian Renshui peered at the girl before her in surprise. It was the height of summer, blistering hot, yet Xiaoying sat swaddled as if in layers of bandages. A large red welt swelled on her brow, and the area around her eyes was reddened as well. Before Xiaoying could answer, another figure emerged from the exit, crawling into view. Qian Renshui's initial puzzlement melted into delight as she recognized him. "Xiao Feng!" She hurried forward, paying no heed to Xiaoying. Despite the drastic change in his appearance, Shi Feng was unmistakable to her. He looked up, his face breaking into a bright grin. "Sister Shuer," he greeted, arms outstretched. Qian Renshui carried with her a subtle, intoxicating scent, nothing like Hulina's fragrance, yet equally enchanting. Shi Feng returned her hug warmly, then gently released her. On the sidelines, Xiaoying froze, wide-eyed and speechless. The closeness between them felt like an invisible barrier cutting her out. Uncomfortable and suddenly on the verge of tears, she wished she could slip away, but she remained rooted in place, watching their easy camaraderie with a sinking heart. "Let me take a closer look." Qian Renshui set both hands on Shi Feng's shoulders and studied him with a critical eye. Although he was barely a teenager, his tall, muscular frame and composed bearing made him seem years older. His resolute, handsome face brought an approving nod to her lips. "You're getting more and more handsome, Shi Feng," she teased. "I'll bet you've got half the girls at the academy pining after you by now." With a gentle tug, she guided him to a chair beside her. "Xiaoying, come sit over here too," Qian Renshui called to the young girl playing nearby. Shi Feng returned his sister's playful smile. "Aunt Renshui, you just keep growing more beautiful yourself." In his eyes, only teacher Bibi Dong could rival Qian Renshui's beauty, and even she fell just a hair short. Huliena, impressive as she was, simply didn't compare. Qian Renshui rolled her eyes in mock exasperation. "Flattery won't get you out of my questions. Didn't you promise a year ago you'd visit me sooner? What kept you?" Shi Feng's expression turned serious. "Teacher sent me to a remote training compound. I've spent the last year refining my skills." At the word teacher, Qian Renshui's eyes brightened, curiosity clearly sparked. She glanced at the girl beside her and smiled. "Xiaoying, what happened? Why are you all bruised and battered today?" Xiaoying opened her mouth to explain, but the words caught in her throat. Finally she whispered, "Miss, I'm fine. I just felt unwell and slipped." She kept her gaze fixed on the floor, unwilling to meet Qian Renshui's eyes as she lied. Qian Renshui's expression softened. "Very well. Get some rest. Shi Feng and I need to talk alone." "Yes, miss." Ning rose, inwardly resentful. After all, the lady already favored her younger brother over her. As she turned away, Shi Feng called out, "Wait." He produced a small jade vial from his sleeve. "Here, take this. It'll help your wounds heal faster." Xiaoying snorted but accepted the elixir, tossing it into her mouth. She shot Shi Feng a hard look, then slipped down the hidden passage. Once the door closed, Qian Renshui turned to him. "Shi Feng, how is mother doing?" Chapter 183, Shi Feng's Offensive. "Teacher, she's really kind," Shi Feng said with a laugh. "She told me she missed you terribly and asked me to bring you a gift." "Really?" Qian Renshui sprang to her feet, her eyes lighting up. A faint blush warmed her cheeks, and her excitement made it impossible to stay still. Shi Feng had expected her reaction. He stood and crossed the room to Qian Renshui's bedside, and she hurried after him, practically buzzing with anticipation. "Let me see it," she urged, voice trembling. With a playful grin, Shi Feng produced more than a dozen sets of women's clothing, one delicate package after another. Qian Renshui's eyes sparkled as if she'd uncovered a trove of jewels. From beneath the loose folds of her nightgown, her smooth, pale forearms slipped out as she lifted each garment, running her fingers over the fine fabrics and exquisite stitching. Every piece in this collection bore Bibi Dong's unmistakable taste for luxury, rich silks, soft satins, and designs that balanced elegance with comfort. "Sister, why don't you try them on and see which style you like best?" Shi Feng suggested gently from the side. Seeing the joy on her face warmed him, and he couldn't help but return her bright smile. Qian Renshui's eyes lit up like fireflies. "Yes," she exclaimed, reaching for her nightgown, then froze. "Oh dear, I almost forgot you were still here." Shi Feng broke out in a cold sweat. Renshui's excitement was so boundless she'd nearly undressed in front of him. He could already imagine the teasing scolding she'd give him later. Renshui snagged a few outfits and darted into the bathroom. A moment later, she reappeared in a pale green dress that cinched her slim waist and flared just above her knees. Her golden hair fell in loose waves down her back, framing a flawless oval face. She did a quick little twirl in front of Shi Feng, the skirt fanning out around her. "How do I look?" she asked, blinking expectantly. "Lovely," Shi Feng said, nodding earnestly. Relief and gratitude swelled in Renshui's eyes. "Xiaofeng, thank you, truly." He had smoothed over that delicate matter with her mother. If not for him, she might never have the chance to mend fences with Bibi Dong. Shi Feng allowed himself a half-smile. "Words aren't enough, sister. You owe me more than just thanks." Renshui's cheeks flushed, and she laughed softly, the tension of the moment dissolving into something warm and hopeful. "How would you like my sister to thank you?" Qian Renshui asked coolly, her pale eyes unflinching. Ever since Shi Feng had helped her fulfill the wish that had consumed her for years, she pledged to repay him in any way he desired. Shi Feng stepped forward, a roguish smile curling on his lips. He raised an index finger and tapped his own cheek twice in mock challenge. Qian Renshui's eyes flashed with sudden indignation. In one fluid movement, her snow-white calf, bare beneath her flowing skirt, snapped out and struck Shi Feng's chest. Startled, Shi Feng instinctively relaxed his muscles to cushion the blow. Even soft tissue bruised with enough force, but he felt nothing harsher than a firm push. Qian Renshui's frown softened into an amused smile. "I was just teasing," she said lightly, though her gaze still held a spark of mischief. Shi Feng's cheeks warmed with embarrassment. What was he doing, shrinking from a woman's jest? He took a steadying breath, squared his shoulders, and met her eyes head-on. Their gazes locked, and for a moment the air between them crackled with unspoken tension. Shi Feng's heart pounded in his chest as he forced himself to keep his eyes forward, resisting the urge to look back. He held Qian Renshui's gaze without flinching. 10 long seconds passed before she finally blushed, her resolve crumbling as she turned away. A small thrill of triumph raced through Shi Feng. Her blush was all the encouragement he needed. Girls could be like springs. Press just enough and they softened, press too hard and they pushed back. He'd briefly toyed with the idea of taking their teasing further. Bah, Prudence won out. A little harmless banter was fine, so long as she didn't find him repulsive. Reading the sudden awkwardness hanging in the air, Shi Feng changed the subject. "Oh, by the way, the teacher asked me to pass along a message." Qian Renshui blinked, her pretty features composed into an expectant expression. "What is it?" "He says that after you finish your work, you should head home and have dinner together," Shi Feng said easily, as if it were no big deal. Qian Renshui froze. Then, without warning, tears slipped down her cheeks. For a moment, Shi Feng simply watched her, wondering what could have moved her so deeply. If the new clothes had touched Qian Renshui's heart before, Shi Feng's next words moved her to tears. "Why don't you come home with me tonight? Have dinner with my family," he said softly. Qian Renshui felt tears spring to her eyes, but a bright, grateful smile curved her lips. In her mind's eye, she already saw her mother bustling around the table, calling her to eat and fussing over every dish. It took her a few steadying breaths before she looked up and whispered, "Thank you." Instead of teasing her, something he often did, Shi Feng simply guided her to sit beside him on the veranda steps. He noticed the damp streaks on her pale cheeks and almost reached out to brush them away, but stopped himself. Gently, he picked up a piece of fruit. Take your time, he said. A good meal and a good story deserves to be savored. You once mentioned you spent a year training in a mysterious place. Would you tell me about it? Qian Renshui turned to him, her dark eyes warm and trusting. After a moment's pause, she began to speak of Slaughter City, of its cruel trials, of ceaseless battles against monstrous foes, of grueling days and sleepless nights that tested her every ounce of resolve. Shi Feng listened intently. His heart tightened with shock, his jaw clenched with anger at the injustices she'd endured, and more than once he reached out to grip her hand in silent support. Through it all, Qian Renshui's voice remained steady, weaving a vivid, unforgettable tale that drew them closer than ever. Shi Feng puffed out his chest and spoke of his daring exploits as if he were invincible, all but erasing Hu Liana's part in the tale. Qian Renshui watched him, worry softening her features. No wonder you've changed so much. No wonder you've suffered, she said quietly. She remembered the cherubic 6-year-old boy he'd once been, all laughter and bright eyes. Those early days with Shi Feng had been the happiest of her life. After every grueling training session, they'd flop down side by side, and she'd beg him to spin her a romantic love story. Each one left her sobbing with sympathy, and even now she could recite them word for word. She'd already come to see Shi Feng as the little brother she never had. Gently, she reached out and touched his arm. He turned to her and smiled confidently. Sister, I'm not broken, he said. Every time I face something impossible, I tell myself that if I can just get through it, I'll come back to you. That thought is my greatest strength. They may have come at me in their thousands, stormed and slaughtered, but I never once gave up. Because I carry your frowns and your smiles with me, I know you're still waiting. I can't die, not when I still long to come to the Tiando Empire and see you. Shi Feng's words were startling in their frankness. Qian Renshui's lips parted in surprise. She had never heard such a confession. She turned her face away, unwilling to meet his fervent gaze. All this time, he had risked everything, slipping through death's grasp again and again, just for her. Her heart fluttered at the thought. Should she scold him for his recklessness, or simply forgive his rashness? A warm blush crept across her cheeks, turning her creamy skin to a soft rose. In profile, her features, long lashes, a straight nose, and gentle lips, seemed impossibly delicate under the lantern light. Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken emotion. Finally, Shi Feng let his eyes drift away, the tension breaking like the softest sigh. Chapter 184, A New Identity. Shi Feng leaned forward, his gaze never leaving Qian Renshui's resolute face. Summarize the current situation of the Heaven Do Empire. Qian Renshui inclined her head slightly, but kept her eyes fixed on him. The empire once had 4 princes. 2 have already been eliminated. The 4th is nothing but a dandy, spends his days indulging in wine and women. He poses no real threat. She paused, her voice growing steely. I am now the recognized crown prince. I've struck at Shuye already. His health is failing, but he still commands the army without question. Shi Feng's jaw clenched. Until we control the military, half our plan remains undone. Precisely, Qian Renshui agreed. Most of the court's ministers are behind me. Once the army's loyalty shifts, we'll be able to annex the Heaven Do Empire in short order. She leaned in, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Then, with the Spirit Hall's secret backing, we'll openly subdue the remaining kingdoms and duchies. The Heaven Do Empire will become an unassailable stronghold, an ironclad bulwark supporting the Spirit Hall. Shi Feng's eyes glittered with determination. After that, we move on the Douluo Empire. Shi Feng watched as Qian Renshui nodded thoughtfully. Our Spirit Hall sits trapped between the 2 great empires, she explained. If we strike openly, both of them will pounce. Our only hope is to covertly undermine each power in turn. He inclined his head. Understood. So you poisoned Shuye? Qian Renshui's lips curved into a grim smile. Yes. Wuhan Temple's master poisoner crafted a blend so subtle that no one, even the most astute alchemists, will detect a trace of toxin. Shuye will believe his strength is failing from age or fatigue. When he finally collapses, he'll have no choice but to pass the throne to me. For a moment, her expression tightened. It's a chronic poison. Symptoms might not show for years, but if we can seize control of the Heavenly Do Empire, waiting will be worth it. Shi Feng let out a quiet sigh. Qian Renshui had foreseen nearly every obstacle, except Prince Shui Beng, the fourth son who feigned madness and folly. If he himself hadn't been privy to the plot, Shi Feng thought, he might have overlooked the prince's disguise just as completely. And even now, the poison scheme was far from foolproof. In the original story, the venomous spirit Douluo Dugubo bonded with Prince Shui Xing to repay a debt of gratitude, and in the process, it unearthed the truth behind Shui Ye's poisoning. But now that the prophet Shi Feng has arrived on the scene, such accidents are no longer a concern. Shui Beng and Prince Shui Xing will be held to account in due time. There's no need to rush. Shi Feng watched as poisoned Douluo Dugubo formally pledged himself to Wu Hundian. Bibi Dong had reluctantly accepted him, but she still harbored doubts and was eager to send him straight off to Wuhan City. Dugubo, however, flatly refused. He insisted he still owed Prince Shuixing a debt of gratitude and would not leave until he'd settled it. Shi Feng had already queried Bibi Dong about the matter. After all, Dugubo's promise to repay such a favor before relocating was entirely reasonable. Still, Shi Feng resolved to nudge the process along. He needed to see for himself whether Dugubo's loyalty truly lay with Wu Hundian. Later, Shi Feng glanced over at Qian Renshui. "By the way," he asked casually, "did you hear that poison Douluo Dugubo has officially joined the Spirit Hall?" Qian Renshui inclined her head in acknowledgement, then fixed him with a teasing look. "So this was your handiwork, then?" Shi Feng chuckled, feigning modesty. "Hardly. It was no great feat." Qian Renshui rolled her eyes, but the corner of her mouth curved in reluctant admiration. The young man she'd once known had come a long way indeed. Although Dugubo has joined our group, he still remains close to Prince Shuixing. We can't risk revealing any of our core secrets to him. He doesn't even know my true identity, Qian Renshui explained. She paused, studying Shi Feng's face. "So if you want to stay by my side, you'll need to hide that face of yours from everyone. Dugubo would recognize you instantly." With that, she flipped her hand over and presented him with a sleek, flesh-colored mask. "This was made especially for you. It not only alters your appearance, but also blocks your spiritual signature from detection." Shi Feng raised an eyebrow. "A human skin mask?" Although he'd slain foes without hesitation, the idea of wearing someone else's skin made his skin crawl. "It isn't actual skin," Qian Renshui reassured him, a faint smile on her lips. "It's fashioned from a specially treated alloy and wrapped in a polymer that mimics human flesh. Go on, try it." He took the mask hesitantly and ran a fingertip over its smooth surface. It was eerily soft, smoother even than his own cheek. After a moment's hesitation, he lifted it to his face, letting the material settle. He took a quick look at his reflection in the polished steel wall. Every contour had shifted. His high cheekbones were now gentler, his sharp jawline softened. Even his eyes seemed set a little wider, a shade darker. He let out a low whistle. "Well, I suppose my handsome face is officially undercover," he joked, his tone light but his eyes thoughtful. Qian Renshui laughed softly. "Don't worry, I'm not trying to turn you into some hideous creature." She paused, then winced playfully. "Although, come to think of it, calling you a monster might be accurate in other contexts." She covered her mouth, realizing her slip. Shi Feng offered a wry grin. "If I'm a monster, let me at least be a handsome one." She shook her head, amusement dancing in her eyes. "Very well, now that you're unrecognizable, we can move freely. Just remember, no one must see your real face, not even Prince Shuixing's shadow." With that final warning, Qian Renshui slipped back into the shadows, leaving Shi Feng alone with his new disguise and the weight of the secrets it protected. Qiao's cheeks flushed, and she fell silent. Shi Feng was entirely focused on the mask in his hands and didn't notice anything unusual about Qian Renshui until her teasing words sent a spark of curiosity through him. He lifted the mask to his face, eager to try it on, but fumbling fingers and the mask's unfamiliar straps made it impossible to fit properly. Qian Renshui sighed and rolled her eyes. "You're hopelessly clumsy. Here, let me." She came around to stand before him, her soft, warm palms carefully guiding the mask into place. Shi Feng sat perfectly still, utterly mesmerized by the fine details of her face framed by the mask. He was so transfixed that he barely registered the gentle brush of her fingertips against his cheek. "Hey, what are you staring at?" Renshui asked, bewildered. When she followed his gaze, she finally caught sight of his wide-eyed expression. "Well, you certainly have some nerve," she scolded in a playful tone. With a swift twist, she pinched his ear and tugged him toward the dressing table. "Now look at yourself." Shi Feng rubbed his ears and laughed. "My sister's so beautiful, I can't help bragging." Qian Renshui shot him a look. She'd better curb his swagger before it got out of hand. Rolling her eyes, she teased, "So this fox spirit sister of yours, does she really live up to your hype?" Shi Feng nodded earnestly. "Absolutely. But you're even more beautiful than my senior sister." He truly meant it. In terms of looks, Qian Renshui did outshine Huliana. Renshui didn't stop to wonder how sincere he was. Who doesn't love being told they're gorgeous? Shi Feng turned away from her and faced the mirror, studying his new visage. For a moment, he was silent, taking in unfamiliar yet oddly familiar features. Then a broad, warm smile broke across his face. The reflection staring back was handsome, with the same magnetic charm of his original self. "How's this?" he asked, grinning at Renshui. She glanced at his reflection and returned his smile. "Not bad, almost as pretty as me." Shi Feng reached up to stroke his cheek. The skin was unbelievably smooth. Even though it was just a crafted disguise, every subtle shift in his expression remained perfectly visible. Shi Feng leaned forward, his dark eyes gleaming with curiosity. "So what identity will you arrange for me?" Qian Renshui studied him for a moment, brushing a strand of silvery hair behind her ear. "Has your master given you any instructions?" He shook his head, a small wry smile tugging at his lips. "He simply told me to stay by your side, to learn how to weave schemes and manipulate others." Qian Renshui's lips curved into a faint, enigmatic smile. "In that case, let us begin." She rose gracefully, turning toward the corridor. Shi Feng followed close behind, ready to discover just how deep the game of intrigue could go. Shi Feng stared in surprise as Qian Renshui's expression shifted. She pointed at him, bewildered. "When did you learn to speak like that?" Her lips curved into a teasing smile. "That's because from now on, you're staying by my side as my personal guard." "My personal guard?" Shi Feng's eyes lit up at the idea. Qian Renshui shook her head, half amused, half exasperated. "Don't get ahead of yourself. There are only 8 guardians sworn to the Wuhun Palace, each one completely loyal. You'll become the 9th. Shi Feng's heart thumped. "Do they even know who you really are?" Qian Renshui sighed softly. "Not a soul. They only know that I hold a high rank in the Wuhun Hall. They don't even suspect that I'm a woman. Their sole duty is to protect me." She reached into her robes and drew out a thick dossier, tossing it to him. Shi Feng caught it and flipped through the pages. The file detailed his new identity as an unremarkable soul master with no ties to the palace beyond his assigned role. "Memorize every detail," Qian Renshui instructed. "You'll need it when the other guards meet you." Shi Feng closed the dossier and met her gaze. "All right, but how do I officially join your guard?" Qian Renshui's smile turned sly. "I've already set everything in motion. Tomorrow at dawn, you'll report to the Wuhun Hall's main compound under your new name and rank. They'll welcome you as one of their own. Just follow my lead, and you'll be safe." Shi Feng nodded, determination flooding his chest. "I won't let you down." With that promise made, he tucked the dossier into his belt and prepared himself for whatever lay ahead, ready to stand between Qian Renshui and any danger that dared approach. Qian Renshui tapped the dossier in her hand. "See this? It says you're a distant cousin of our chief guard. He's personally vouched for you." "Study this file until you've memorized every line," she continued. "Tomorrow, or the day after, I'll have the chief guard come fetch you." Shi Feng frowned. "Study it? And go where?" Qian Renshui's lips curved into a sly smile. "Back to that little courtyard of yours, of course, unless you'd rather spend the night in my chambers?" Shi Feng laughed, rubbing his hands together. "I haven't seen my sister in ages. I was thinking we could catch up properly, maybe stay up all night." "Spare me," she said, rolling her eyes. "I've got plenty of good stories to tell." "Fine," she replied with mock patience. "Tell me 2 of them, and then you can go." Chapter 185, I'm Not Interested in You. Night stretched on until, before Qian Renshui knew it, the hour grew late. Even after Shi Feng's 2 chosen tales, she felt curiously unsatisfied. The moonlight seeped through the window, and she realized how long they'd both sat there. Raising her pale, finely sculpted chin, She met Shi Feng's gaze with an air of regal indifference. After she finished telling the story, Qianrenshui gave Shi Feng a nod. You can go now. Shi Feng stretched his shoulders and flashed a mischievous grin. Big sis, it's so late. If I leave now, I'll wake that little girl. How about I stay and serve as her personal bedwarmer tonight? Before he could finish, Qianrenshui delivered a swift kick to his backside, sending him sprawling across the floor. Get lost, she snapped. Once he'd picked himself up, rubbing his pride more than his tailbone, she continued with a sigh. Her name is Xiaoying. She's 17, 6 years older than you. Do you still have the nerve to call her little sister? Shi Feng hesitated. To him, Xiaoying really did seem like a child, petite with that shy downward tilt of her chin. But if her age was 17 and his assigned identity was already 20, then she wasn't really his junior at all. All right, he conceded, brushing dust from his tunic. From now on, I'll call her Miss Xiaoying. After all, I'm a 20-year-old gentleman, so I should be the older one. Qianrenshui waved her hand, exasperated. Fine, do as you like. Her expression softened as she remembered the girl's sorrowful, red eyes. By the way, did you trouble her today? She asked, concern lacing her voice. Shi Feng puffed out his chest. No, absolutely not. He'd had no intention of upsetting her, but whether he'd succeeded or not was another matter entirely. Shi Feng let out a short, amused laugh. When she arrived today, she didn't even recognize me. She drew her bow on me, and I beat her until she was in tears. Qianrenshui inclined her head once. You're my personal bodyguard now. You need to treat her with courtesy. No bullying. Understand? I understand. I won't bully her, Shi Feng replied on the surface. Inwardly, he muttered, unless she really deserves it. He paused, remembering her story. Her background is tragic, he said more quietly. Her father was the one who assassinated Emperor Shui Ye, and that very act created the opening for me to replace Shui Qinghe. Unfortunately, he was gravely wounded in the aftermath and died not long after. Qianrenshui's expression remained calm and unreadable, but Shi Feng could feel her attention sharpen. He found himself picturing the girl again, short black hair, her features an intriguing blend of her parents, cold, reserved, almost distant. Yet in that first encounter, after only a few slaps from him, she had burst into tears. He'd struck harder than he'd planned. I'll go back now, he said, brushing imaginary dust from his sleeves. Stay in the courtyard once you're inside. Qianrenshui instructed, don't wander off. When I've finished here, I'll have the guard captain escort you in. Shi Feng nodded, shouldering his responsibility. Then something warm tugged at him. As always, whenever he looked at her, he gave her a soft smile. Fine, I'll miss you. I'll come see you tonight. And with that, he turned and walked away, already anticipating the evening. Qianrenshui turned her head away and let out a soft sigh. Shi Feng, please, don't do this. Shi Feng met her gaze steadily. I have a story to tell. All right, then, don't forget to bring Xiaoying with you. Shi Feng offered a wry smile. Got it. I'm off. He slid open the concealed hatch beneath Qianrenshui's bed and dropped silently into the hidden passage. Upstairs, Qianrenshui lingered by the opening for a long moment, then released a soft, inscrutable sigh. In the dim tunnel, Shi Feng picked up his pace, a thrill running through him. After hours under Qianrenshui's watchful gaze earlier, she'd shown no objection to his gentle familiarity. Well, he supposed it helped that he was both competent and good-looking, qualities she clearly respected. Had he been plain or physically weak, she might well have chided him with a laugh. Shi Feng, you'll always be just like a younger brother to me. He chuckled to himself at the thought, and then found his mind drifting to Xiaoying. She was still so young. Aside from her lovely face and slight curves, she had yet to truly bloom. Earlier, the walk from the small courtyard to the palace had taken them nearly 10 minutes. Now, fueled by anticipation, Shi Feng dashed through the secret corridors, determined to reach her room in under 10. Shi Feng activated the Eye of Punishment. A faint glow pulsed at his temple as he scanned the ceiling above, only to discover the girl fast asleep on the raised platform. Silently, he tapped the floor with his knuckles. The sound rang out crisp and clear. Then he pressed the hidden switch once more, and a section of the wall slid open. He slipped through the narrow passage. By the time he stepped back into the chamber, the girl was on her feet, eyes blazing with alarm. She thrust a dagger in front of her. "Who are you?" she demanded, voice low and tense. Shi Feng took 2 measured steps forward, her blade edge shifting back as she retreated. That's when he noticed the mask he'd forgotten he was wearing. Featherlight, breathable, and magically seamless. He touched it, remembering how he'd worn it for hours without even breaking a sweat. With a swift motion, he peeled it from his face and held it aside. "Look closely," he said, voice calm. "It's me, Shi Feng." He leaned forward, closing the distance. The girl's hand shot out before he could say another word. Her palm landed squarely on his cheek. But Shi Feng was ready. He tilted back at the last moment, and her strike met only empty air. He gave a faint, reassuring smile. The tension in her eyes wavered, and for the first time, Shi Feng saw curiosity behind her vigilance. The woman stopped mid-attack the moment she realized she couldn't overpower Shi Feng. She steadied her breathing, folded her arms, and glared at him with narrowed eyes. "You're back so late," she said, voice cold. "Did you lay a hand on Miss Xue?" Shi Feng gave her a lazy sidelong glance, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "It's past midnight, the fire's almost out, and there's just a lone man and a widow tending the hearth. What do you think happens next?" Her eyes snapped open in fury. "You'll both answer for this." She lunged, dagger raised. In the next instant, Shi Feng was upon her, his fingers closing around her wrist, wrenching the blade free. With a casual flick, he sent the dagger spinning into the wooden wall behind them. The woman's chest heaved, anger radiating off her in waves. Yet to Shi Feng, she wasn't worth another thought. He simply tilted his head. "Xue asked me to stay for a few days. See to my quarters." She hesitated, chest still pounding, then bowed stiffly and backed away. "As you wish." Shi Feng froze under her furious glare. He raised his hands in surrender. "I swear we did nothing, just talked about the Wuhan Palace." She narrowed her eyes. "Is that so?" "Absolutely." "Fine, then get out." Shi Feng blinked, bewildered. "Excuse me?" Her arms snapped across her chest as she pulled her cloak tightly around her shoulders, her gaze sharp as a blade. "Don't think you can fool me. Try anything suspicious and I'll report you to the lady." Shi Feng offered a thin smile. "Oh, the lady you mean is Princess Taiping, right?" A flicker of outrage pupped across her face. He only shrugged and continued. "Besides, I'm barely more than a boy. I haven't even grown a proper beard yet. Hardly the type who causes trouble or needs special accommodations." With a low chuckle, he turned and walked off, vanishing down the corridor before she could think of a retort. She watched him go, every inch of her trembling with rage. His parting words echoed in her mind. He's still a child? No beard at all? Suddenly she realized exactly who he was. Shi Feng. Impossible. Her indignation flared hotter than ever. She remembered Princess Taiping's veiled insult all at once, and her blood boiled so fiercely she felt as if she might split in two. Whirling to face Shi Feng, her eyes blazed. "I'll kill you," she snarled, every word laced with venom. "You bastard! You freak! You sex-obsessed demon!" Shi Feng perched cross-legged on the rooftop above Xiaoying's room, feeling each tremor of her furious shouts below. He stared straight ahead, pretending not to notice the commotion. By first light, the sun's rays had barely crested the hills when Shi Feng's calm betrayed him. His grip slipped on the weathered tiles, and thump, he tumbled off the roof, landing just as Xiaoying stormed into the hallway. He flashed her a casual grin. "Morning, Sister Xiaoying." She didn't even slow. Her brow was tense, her eyes fixed straight ahead. "I'm heading out for breakfast. Grab me something on your way back," she called over her shoulder, and swept past him without a second glance. Shi Feng watched her retreating figure, wincing at the fresh sting of her indifference. Yesterday's prank must have really hit a nerve. Qian Renshui had warned him to tread carefully around Xiaoying, advice he was now regretting. Determined to make amends, he scanned the corridor and spotted the old staff kitchen. The door hung slightly ajar. With a quick nod to himself, he slipped inside. The kitchen appeared well-appointed, rows of gleaming pots and pans, polished countertops, but a thick layer of dust betrayed years of neglect. Shi Feng rubbed his palms together. If he could coax something edible out of this ghost kitchen, maybe, just maybe, he could ease the tension with a simple act of goodwill. He set to work. Chapter 186, Eat More Papaya. Shi Feng had made up his mind. He would apologize to his sister for making her cry. Although Qian Renshui had forbidden him to wander off, the sun was only just rising, and she wouldn't be able to send the head of her guards to watch over him for some time. Seizing the moment, Shi Feng skipped washing his face and slipped out the door, determined to fetch whatever he needed for his peace offering. An hour later, he returned, his soul tool inventory brimming with fresh ingredients. The satisfaction of a successful gathering warmed him as he made his way back upstairs. Standing outside his sister Xiaoying's door, he paused. The faint hum of soul power cultivation drifted through the wood. She was inside. He knocked softly. Silenced. Taking her lack of response as tacit permission, Shi Feng pushed the door open. Xiaoying sat cross-legged on her bed, eyes closed, her aura pulsing with concentrated energy. When she sensed him enter, her eyes snapped open, and she shot him a sharp glare. Shi Feng squared his shoulders and spoke plainly. "I'm sorry. I went too far yesterday, and I really am sorry for making you cry." Xiaoying let out a cold snort and returned to glaring at him without a word. "I'll prepare a surprise for you later, as my apology," Shi Feng said, offering her a small, apologetic smile. Xiaoying glared at him, her hostility plain. Without another word, Shi Feng shook his head, closed the door, and turned back to his work. Only after he'd gone did her expression soften, just barely, but inside she was still seething. Last night, she'd come home alone and replayed everything in her mind until she realized the entire misunderstanding had been her fault. She'd planned to forgive Shi Feng today, but the moment he walked through the door, he'd mercilessly pressed both of her most sensitive points. Anything else she could have brushed off, but not that. "Forgive you? In your dreams," she muttered through clenched teeth, her body trembling. Shi Feng's jibe about her baldness and Princess Taiping rank had stung too deeply. She'd practically wanted to disappear. "Calm down, calm down." She forced herself to close her eyes, to draw in slow breaths. It took her a full 10 minutes to tame the storm inside her and clear her mind. Only then did she convince herself to return to her practice. Just as she picked up her racket again, a steady series of taps came from outside the door. Ping, pong, ping, her brow furrowed. What was Shi Feng up to now? Xiaoying's concentration shattered the moment the voices started up again. She could no longer focus on her practice. Frustration bubbled up until she sprang out of bed, ready to storm out of the room in a rage. Then she remembered what Shi Feng had said about making things right. Pausing on the threshold, she crept over to the window and cracked it open. Below, Shi Feng was hard at work in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, stirring sauces, and arranging a colorful array of ingredients on the counter. Xiaoying's dark eyes went wide. An apology by cooking for me? She thought in disbelief. She could barely manage instant noodles. What could he, a man, possibly prepare that would be worth eating? She snorted, folding her arms. She had no illusions that his cooking skills were any better than her own, and she was determined to refuse whatever he came up with. Yet, as she watched him move with quiet focus, measuring spices, adjusting the heat, some of her anger drained away. Despite herself, she found her irritation softening at the sight of his earnest effort. Xiaoying felt her mood lifting and crawled back into bed, determined to continue her cultivation exercises. 3 hours later, as she sank into the deepest level of meditation, her alabaster nose suddenly twitched. She bolted upright, inhaling sharply. A heady blend of steamed rice and rich bone broth drifted on the breeze. Curious, she slipped to the window and peered out. In the courtyard below, Shi Feng had a large pot of pork ribs simmering over a low fire. Steam curled from its lid, carrying hours of slow-cooking fragrance into the air. Xiaoying's stomach rumbled. She pressed her cheek against the cool glass, her resolve to focus on cultivation dissolving in the face of such temptation. She watched, entranced, as Shi Feng methodically stirred the soup, then turned to prepare the rest of the meal. Glancing at the rough-hewn wooden clock on the wall, Shi Feng noted the hour. Satisfied, he arranged 6 dishes on the low table, a steaming bowl of rice, the pork rib soup, fragrant stir-fried vegetables, marinated tofu, and 2 simple but carefully seasoned side dishes. He stepped back, took it all in, and allowed himself a small, pleased smile. Despite the years since he last cooked like this, his skills had not slipped a bit. In his previous life, he'd been known as Little Chef. Every time his family took a holiday, his parents would haul him into their restaurant kitchen to help out. Now, carrying plate after plate of freshly made dishes, Shi Feng stepped out into the courtyard and arranged them carefully in the cool shade. He glanced up at Xiaoying's window and caught a dark shape retreating behind the curtains. A quiet smile curved his lips. She'd taken the bait. After all, who can resist good food? Methodically, he served each dish before lifting a steaming bowl of pork rib soup. As he removed the lid, a rich, savory aroma drifted through the courtyard. Shi Feng walked to the front door and tapped gently. Xiaoying, lunch is ready. Silence. He cleared his throat and added, "Consider this my peace offering for yesterday." A moment later, the door creaked open, and Xiaoying stepped out, drawn as he'd hoped by the irresistible scent. Her expression remained as frosty as ever. She cast Shi Feng a cool glance and said, "I'll give you this one chance. If it doesn't live up to my expectations, don't bother offering apologies." Shi Feng watched her closely. Her large, dark eyes kept flicking toward the dishes laid out on the table, betraying her eagerness. He couldn't hide his grin. "Trust me," he replied confidently. "You're gonna love it." Without another word, she strode over, sank into her chair, and leaned forward. Excitement flitted across her face as she scooped up the first bite of Shi Feng's handiwork. The moment Shi Feng lowered himself opposite her, her bright smile vanished and her features hardened again. Yet her chopsticks never paused. "Take your time," he said, ladling a steaming bowl of soup beside her plate. "There's plenty more where this came from." She lifted the spoon, and the rich broth flooded her palate with layers of flavor she'd never known. Each bite offered a new thrill, her taste buds dancing with delight. In that instant, she was convinced that not even the most acclaimed restaurants in Tiando City could rival the exquisite dishes before her. Xiaojing had never eaten at a place like this before, but that didn't stop her from heaping praise on Shi Feng's cooking. "This is the best meal I've ever had," she declared, thinking back to every dish she'd tried as a child. Shi Feng simply smiled and watched as she methodically cleared the table. In just over 10 minutes, 6 dishes and a steaming bowl of soup had vanished. Suddenly, Xiaoying let out a long hiccup and placed a hand on her now rounded belly. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment, her first in front of Shi Feng. He returned her smile warmly, got up, and disappeared into the kitchen. A moment later, he re-emerged carrying a plate of fresh papaya slices. "Here," he said, setting the plate in front of her. "Papaya's good for you." Xiaoying stared at the fruit. "Papaya? What's it do?" Shi Feng's eyes twinkled. "Have you noticed Xue's figure lately?" Xiaoying nodded, a twinge of envy in her gaze. "She looks amazing." "Don't you wish you looked like her?" he teased gently. Xiaoying's lips pressed together as she shot him a mock glare. But not wanting to offend him, especially after such a wonderful meal, she finally looked down and gave a small, reluctant nod. "Here, have some more papaya," Shi Feng suggested with mock earnestness. "I heard it actually helps with development." Xiaoying shot him a fierce glare, but after a moment's hesitation, took a bite anyway. Shi Feng wasn't convinced that papaya possessed any magical growth properties. It was just something he'd picked up. Still, if it eased her mind, it was worth a try. He couldn't resist a small grin as she chewed. "That's all I can do for now," he said. "If this doesn't work, I'm afraid she'll have to rely on her future husband." Chapter 1 Ace Sing. In less than a moment, Xiaoying had polished off the entire plate of sliced papaya, her belly giving a satisfied little swell. Shi Feng chuckled as he refilled his teacup, then poured a fragrant brew into a delicate porcelain cup and slid it across to her. "Are you trying to fatten me up until I can't move?" Xiaoying teased, her clear eyes dancing with amusement. Shi Feng's grin widened. "Drink this tea, and we're friends," he said, confident she'd have no trouble finishing it. With a playful snort, Xiaoying lifted the cup and drank down the steaming liquid in one smooth motion. Shi Feng's smile turned radiant, his white teeth catching the lantern light. He extended his hand. "I'm Shi Feng," he offered. "Let's get to know each other." Xiaoying's brow lifted in mild surprise. "A handshake?" she asked. "In my homeland, it's how friends are made," Shi Feng explained, his tone warm and genuine. Xiaoying studied him for a long moment, searching his eyes for any hint of mockery or deceit. Finding only sincerity, she lifted her own slender hand and returned his grip. Their hands met in a firm shake, and just like that, a new friendship was sealed. Shi Feng noticed the bruise darkening on Xiaoying's forehead and reached into his satchel. He withdrew a small vial of healing elixir and offered it to her. Here, consider this part of my apology. Xiaoying's eyes brightened at the gift, but she caught herself and accepted the vial in silence, careful not to seem too eager. As she turned it over in her palm, Shi Feng's stomach gave an unmistakable growl. You haven't eaten? Xiaoying asked, glancing at the empty dishes on the table. Only moments before, she had quietly finished every bite herself and completely forgotten about him. Heat rushed to her cheeks. I'm sorry, she whispered. Shi Feng waved a hand, flashing her a reassuring smile. Don't worry about it. Going hungry for a day won't kill me. And anyway, this elixir is my real apology. He rolled up his sleeves. Let me take care of these. Xiaoying bit her lip, tempted to help, but she hesitated. Their friendship had thawed since the argument, but it wasn't quite close enough for her to jump in uninvited. She settled into a chair nearby and watched quietly as Shi Feng rinsed plates and stacked bowls with efficient strokes. The soft clink of porcelain was the only sound between them, and for a moment it felt peaceful. Then Xiaoying's eyes widened as she remembered something. Excusing herself with a polite nod, she rose and slipped into the adjacent room, leaving Shi Feng to finish the chore in solitary calm. Shi Feng finished rinsing the last dish and set it on the rack. He glanced up to see Xiaoying tidying the spare room's scattered cushions and blankets. He tucked a loose strand of hair behind his ear and smiled. Since Miss Xue has allowed you to stay here, this room is yours from now on. Xiaoying paused in mid-sweep, turned, and stared at him with narrowed eyes. Are you older than me? Shi Feng straightened. Clearing his throat, he spoke with mock solemnity. Actually, I just turned 20 this year. You can call me Brother Shi Feng, or Brother Feng for short. Xiaoying folded her arms, clearly unimpressed. Don't try to sweet-talk me. Miss Xue calls you brother, and you call her sister. But I'm a year older than Miss Xue. A brief frown crossed Shi Feng's face before he shook his head, sighing. You're misunderstanding. Xue is incredibly talented, and she's stronger than I'll ever be. Back when we were training together, she used to beat me at nearly everything. That's why I started calling her sister. It wasn't meant to be cute. It was respect. Xiaoying's expression softened only slightly. Shi Feng held up a finger and gave her a firm look. If I'm lying, may I be struck by lightning. His tone was earnest and unwavering. Inside, though, he could barely contain his excitement. After years of always being someone's little brother in Douluo continent, he finally, officially, had a younger sister to look out for. Xiaoying turned her gaze away but clearly trusted Shi Feng. Fine, she said at last, but you're on your own for betting. I'm not covering that. Understood, Shi Feng replied. As she stepped toward the exit, he hurried after her. Xiaoying, wait, could we talk for a moment? She paused and looked back at him. About what? Why you're here, he answered. She retraced her steps and sat on the lower stair beside him, keeping a respectful distance. I'm assigned to guard the secret passage and inspect it regularly, she explained. I'm also the messenger between the young lady and the temple. Shi Feng leaned forward. How do you connect with the temple? Xiaoying met his eyes. There's a second hidden corridor that leads directly to the temple. Apart from the young lady and me, only Bishop Solace knows of it. He has no idea there's a separate tunnel running to the palace. Shi Feng nodded, absorbing this new information. After a moment, Xiaoying settled more comfortably and tilted her head. What about you? What tasks has the young lady given you? Shi Feng paused, considering her words. Xue asked me to be her personal bodyguard. In a few days, her captain is coming to meet me. Xiaoying's brow creased, and a shadow of displeasure crossed her face. What's your relationship with her? She and I go way back, childhood sweethearts, Shi Feng replied casually. He'd only met Qian Renshui recently, but something about Xiaoying's reaction made him suspect there was more to the story. He decided to probe a little. The moment he mentioned sweethearts, Xiaoying's expression snapped from irritation to outrage. Without another word, she stood and stalked away. Shi Feng watched her retreating figure, frowning. Maybe she has issues with her orientation? He muttered under his breath, wondering if that might explain her over-the-top response. After all, Qian Renshui's purity and elegance were breathtaking. Anyone could understand why a girl might be drawn to her. Xiaoying had grown up isolated, first with her father and then alone after his death, scarcely knowing any boys. Given that, it wasn't too surprising she might feel an attraction to another girl. Still, the guess should have bothered him. If Xiaoying was so invested in Qian Renshui, he might expect Shi Feng to feel threatened, but he didn't. Instead, he felt a quiet confidence settle over him. After all, it was Xiaoying who had run off in anger, not him. He had nothing to fear. If Qian Renshui really were by his side, the little girl would be crying her eyes out right now. Shi Feng felt his resolve waver for a heartbeat, but then he steeled himself and whispered a command. Instantly, the small black sparrow perched on a low branch took wing, disappearing over the rooftops toward the prince's mansion. Keeping an eye on fourth Prince Xuexing was Shi Feng's priority, and this assignment had been entrusted to Little Black Sparrow. Rumor held that the dashing prince, celebrated across Tiando City for his extravagant lifestyle, was either mad or feigning madness, and Shi Feng intended to find out which. Tiando City was neatly divided into 4 concentric districts. Farthest out lay the outer city, where Shi Feng's hidden courtyard stood in a particularly remote corner amid the bustling commoners' homes. Within that lay the inner city, reserved for aristocratic families, wealthy merchants, and high-ranking officials, and the site of the venerable Wuhundian Hall. Closer still was the imperial city, where the emperor's children and his princes lived in guarded luxury. At the very center rose the imperial palace itself, the sovereign's immutable seat of power. Each ring reflected its inhabitant's status, and Shi Feng had no intention of forgetting his place or his mission. Shi Feng stood beyond the high walls of the imperial city, watching sentry guards patrol the ramparts. Without an imperial warrant, no one was allowed inside. Beyond these gates lay the emperor's palace, the home of the sovereign and his concubines, and in the East Palace, Crown Prince Sui Qinghe, the emperor's favored heir. Just yesterday, Shi Feng had combed both the outer and inner city districts, bribing informants for every scrap of information he could buy. At great expense, he learned that both Prince Xuexing and fourth Prince Xuebeng kept residences within the forbidden walls, and that those estates lay far apart. Tracking them both by conventional means would be all but impossible. That's why Shi Feng had deployed his little black sparrow, a trained courier bird, to slip through palace defenses. Earlier this morning, the sparrow had flown it on a reconnaissance mission, first to Xuexing's mansion, then to fourth Prince Xuebeng's. Through his inner sight, Shi Feng watched the bird weave through ornately carved halls, searching for the princes. Yet one sparrow alone was hardly enough. If he had 2 or 3 more, he could tail the crown prince, fourth Prince Xuebeng, and even the retired emperor simultaneously. He needed to expand his intelligence network immediately. Resolving to recruit additional agents, Shi Feng refocused his vizi on the sparrow's latest discovery. In the grand hall of Xuexing's mansion, an elderly man in fine robes had just entered, flanked by palace attendants. Shi Feng took note of every detail. It was time to build a team capable of surveying the entire imperial city. Chapter 188. Shi Feng's neatly combed gray hair lay flat against the back of his head. He was of average height and slightly on the heavier side, but his proportions were pleasing, if not for his unusually small eyes, which lent his otherwise fine features a touch of imperiousness. A squad of armored guards surrounded him as he emerged from the gates of the mansion. They bore him aloft in a gilded sedan chair and set off toward the fourth prince's residence. Through the shouts of the guards, Shi Feng heard them address their charge as, "Your Highness, the fourth prince." This was the very man he'd been ordered to keep an eye on. Guiding his tiny avian familiar through the air, Shi Feng trailed the procession until it halted at the prince's courtyard gates. Prince Xuexing stepped down from the sedan chair, his face clouded in discontent and simmering with barely contained anger. At his command, the attendants bowed deeply. "Fetch Xuebeng," the prince said curtly, his tone sharp enough to chill the servants. With a single dismissive snort, he swept past them and entered the reception hall. Shi Feng watched the sedan chair bear Xuexing away before turning his attention to a nearby attendant who was hurrying off to summon Xuebeng. Silently, he followed the man into the heart of the fourth prince's household. "At last, I finally get to see what this Xuebeng looks like," Shi Feng murmured under his breath. The messenger ahead was clearly no soul master. He panted so heavily his robes billowed with each labored step. He'd been the first to register the chill of Prince Xing's wrath just moments before, and dared not tarry. Yet even as he raced on, dread gnawed at him. If he failed to catch Shui Beng's favor, punishment would surely follow. Shi Feng's attendant darted down the moonlit corridor and slipped into the courtyard where Shui Beng's chambers lay. He pressed an ear to the heavy wooden door. Inside, a harsh, maniacal laugh rang out, and beneath it, the broken sobs of a woman. From the adjacent window, Shi Feng didn't hesitate. He leapt onto the sill, just catching sight of the scene within. A fragile young woman huddled against the far wall, tears streaking her cheeks, her pleas torn and hoarse with fear. Across the room loomed a boy of 16 or 17, his eyes alight with cruel delight as he tormented her. Shi Feng's blood heated at the spectacle. He had seen plenty of horrors in Slaughter City, women pressed into all manner of unspeakable service, but this girl was plainly innocent. A cold fury coiled through him, and for a moment he welcomed the promise of violence. This brute deserved death for what he was doing. Outside, the attendant shivered at the door. The prince's word was law in these halls, and no one dared intrude on his whims. Yet the memory of His Excellency's dark scowl and thunderous wrath steeled the man's nerves. Swallowing his fear, he raised a trembling fist and knocked sharply. "Who's there?" The young lord's laughter died in his throat as he barked the question. The trembling servant stuttered. "My lord, the prince has arrived. He's waiting for you in the hall, and he's furious." "Tell him to hold his temper," the young man thundered. At his command, the woman's cries rose sharper, more frantic. After a moment, Lord Shui Beng smoothed his robes and fixed the girl with a cold, menacing stare. "If you ever breathe a word of this, I'll wipe your entire family from the earth." The girl's eyes went blank, her spirit crushed as completely as a blossom battered by a storm. Shui Beng swung open the door, then paused in the threshold. Turning back, he offered her a chilling smile. "The prince is quite satisfied. You may go." He turned on the servant. "You worthless cur, lead the way." The servant shot a hungry glance into the room, no scraps left behind this time, then bowed and hurried off to guide his master to the hall. Behind them, the girl stumbled out, her limbs limp as if strings dragged her from that hellish chamber. She walked on, dazed and hollow, until the walls of Shui Beng's domain receded behind her. Master Shui Beng strolled down the palace corridor, flanked by 2 attentive attendants. One of them, wearing a polite smile, ventured, "My lord, how do you find today's prospect?" Shui Beng's pale face was shadowed by deepening circles beneath his eyes, an all too obvious sign of his recent restlessness. He paused to appraise a young lady being presented to him, then returned the attendant's smile with well-practiced ease. "She's quite admirable," he declared, "clearly from a prominent family. See that I have more like her brought to me." "At once, my lord. I will not disappoint you," the attendant replied with a low bow. Shui Beng cast him a sharp sideways glance. "Don't grow too complacent," he murmured. "There will be consequences if you fail me." As they approached the grand hall, Shui Beng's steps quickened. Of all the members of the imperial family, none inspired more trepidation in him than the prince-uncle. The emperor's own father had long since relinquished any hope of controlling Shui Beng's ambitions, and even his ruthless elder brother had finally stopped watching his back. Only the prince-uncle, seemingly indulgent, but secretly exacting in the extreme, remained a force to be feared. At the hall's threshold, Shui Beng straightened his robes and drew a deep breath, preparing to pay his respects. Before he could step forward, a porcelain teacup hurtled through the air. Time seemed to slow as the cup shattered against the marble floor. Shui Beng froze, every hair on his neck on end, as scalding tea splashed over his robes and trickled down his leg. "Uncle, what's wrong?" Shui Beng's heart pounded, and his face went chalk white. He'd never seen Prince Xuexing this furious. Prince Xuexing's glare one was enough to send the nearest attendant scrambling for the door. "Dismiss the servant," he ordered coldly. The man bowed and slipped out, leaving only the 2 of them in the hall, flanked by silent guards. With a crack that echoed off the marble floor, Xuexing's fists slammed the lacquered tea table, and splinters flew. He rose to his full height, loomed over Shui Beng, and jabbed a finger at his chest. "I told you to play the carefree dandy," he hissed. not to become one. You've turned every night into a debauched spree, roaming brothels, preying on innocent girls, and then you have the nerve to drag me into your disgrace. Shui Xing's voice grew razor-sharp. Do you even remember the throne you're supposed to claim? Shui Beng stammered, trying to defend himself. You asked me to seem harmless, uncle. I needed everyone to think I was nothing more than a fool. So harmless that you undermine our entire house? Shui Xing's rage boiled over. He kicked Shui Beng in the side, sending him staggering against the wall. Your only ambition is to ruin us both. Why don't you spend your spare time learning something truly useful? Shui Xing asked with a sharp glance. Shui Beng shrugged, a mischievous grin tugging at his lips. Uncle, once you uncover the evidence that our eldest brother murdered both the second and third, the crown prince's throne will naturally fall to me. In truth, Shui Beng meant that he preferred far more entertaining pursuits. Countless beauties vied for his attention, and he saw no reason to trade such delights for dull study. Disappointment hardened Shui Xing's features. If you won't apply yourself, then I have no reason to continue teaching you. Even Shui Qinghe, vicious though he may be, shows more promise than you. Without another word, he swept his sleeve aside and turned on his heel. Shui Beng's confidence evaporated. He bolted forward, clutching at his uncle's robes, tears springing to his eyes. Uncle, please, don't give up on me. Uncle, what exactly do you want me to study? Can I really manage it? Shui Beng's earlier carelessness had come entirely from Uncle Shui Xing's assurances and the promise that he would one day claim the throne. The lure of power without effort had blinded him. With a casual flick of his sleeve, Shui Xing sent a dozen or more scrolls and tomes tumbling to the floor. You'll start with the sage's scriptures and the art of war, he said coldly. Spend less time chasing women's favors. Shui Xing snorted, swept up his robes, and strode away. Picking up the nearest book, Shui Beng's lips curled in disgust. Chasing women and sitting on a throne sounds tempting both ways. I suppose I'll just have to amuse myself elsewhere for now. Frustration churned in his chest. He'd once savored all the comforts of a great house, but with Shui Xing's concubines scattered through every hall and corridor, there was no turning back. Eyes cold with determination, Shui Beng muttered, When my brother finally falls, we'll see who dares stop me. High in the trees beyond the courtyard, a black raven rolled its beady eyes, flapped its wings, and fell in behind Prince Shui Xing's retinue. Shi Feng watched the avalanche tumble into the valley below. It posed no real threat. Shui Xing would keep a close eye on it. But Shi Feng's gaze was cold as ice. A moment ago, he'd almost given the order to send his little black sparrow slipping through the chaos to assassinate Shui Xing. He'd stopped himself, though. This matter needed to be discussed with Qian Renshui before deciding on a course of action. Seated on the bed, Shi Feng suddenly stiffened, his senses alert. From somewhere behind the wall came the faint grind of stone on metal. The hidden passage was opening. He shifted, peered through a narrow crack, and there, stepping into the room, was an elderly man crowned in white gold. The newcomer's face was as pale and pitted as an ancient moon, his hair and temples silvered with age. His body, tall and thin as a javelin, belied a vitality far beyond his apparent 70 years. Shi Feng had never laid eyes on him before, but the 5-pointed platinum crown and the flowing episcopal robes left no doubt. This was the platinum bishop himself. Solace, lord of Tiando City and one of the 4 platinum bishops of Wuhundian, entered the antechamber with measured steps. Shi Feng had already met the other 3 bishops when he first came to the Spirit Hall, but Solace was nowhere in sight. He had been transferred to Tiando City before Shi Feng's arrival. Now, Solace stood before the young stewardess Xiaoying, his presence as imposing as the title he bore. Xiaoying bowed deeply, pressing her palms together at chest level in deference. Solace regarded her coolly for a moment, then withdrew a sealed letter from his robes and handed it across the polished marble floor. A confidential dispatch from the papal palace, he announced in a resonant tone. Xiaoying accepted it reverently. Your Grace, you have my word. I will see this delivered safely to the young lady. Solace inclined his head once in acknowledgement but offered no further words. Silently, he turned and slipped into the hidden corridor beyond the far wall. Only when the door whispered shut behind him did Xiaoying allow herself to exhale. The faint creak of hinges interrupted her relief. The door swung inward, and Shi Feng stepped in, his expression apologetic. Xiaoying's eyes narrowed in annoyance. "Don't you know how to knock before entering someone's chambers?" "Sorry," Shi Feng murmured, rubbing the back of his neck sheepishly. He took in the bowed stewardess and the folded letter clutched in her hands, and realized, with a sudden jolt, that events were moving faster than he'd anticipated. Shi Feng charged up to the door so hastily that he didn't even knock. Xiaoying's eyes narrowed the instant he stepped inside, and she fell silent. Ignoring her warning, Shi Feng reached for the folded letter lying on the table, only to have her slender hand slap his aside with a sharp crack. "This is meant for Miss Ying, X." Xiaoying snapped, her voice cold. "Neither you nor I have any right to read it." With that, she tucked the sealed parchment into her soul guide as deftly as a pickpocket stowing plunder. Shi Feng clenched his fists. That scrap of paper came straight from the Pope's palace. Surely it held some scheme against the Heaven Do imperial family. As the future lord of that very house, he ought to know its contents. He briefly considered revealing his true identity. After all, if she knew he was her long-lost son, perhaps she'd hand over the letter willingly. But then he'd be gloating, and such pride-end friendships before they even began. He rolled his eyes and forced a crooked smile. "Sister Xiaoying," he said in a softer tone, "you seemed to like the lunch I made today, didn't you?" Xiaoying hesitated, her cheeks flushing slightly. She'd complimented his cooking, yes? Hadn't she? Her big eyes brightened, and she nodded. "Great," Shi Feng continued, leaning casually against the doorframe. "Let me prepare dinner for you tonight, too." Her throat bobbed as she swallowed nervously. "Or really?" Shi Feng only grinned. If he could win her trust first, the letter might just find its way into his hands. "Really," Shi Feng said, nodding.